right?
Or else
Otherwise you just know, and now you're complicit, right? We get back to...
That's it. There it is. There's the loop. And now we're getting back to the loop because you don't know better. So you don't do better. So you follow whatever the status quo is. And we all keep talking about acceptance and love and da. But we don't actually ever engage or actually learn anything. Right. So we keep doing the same things, right? And so then it makes this loop.
Yeah. I mean, it's very clear when, either you don't know or you don't care. All right, so my guest today is a longtime friend of mine. We came up on the East Coast together in the dance scene, and we reunited in LA. And you can find him doing a lot of creative things. He has the Just Carr podcast on Spotify. Go give that a follow. He's also the creator of the Real Talk television IG page. Lots of great content there. And just so you guys understand who this man is, right? So he's has a degree in child psychology from Appalachian State.
True.
He, over the last few years, I've been able to see him grow into this amazing, fantastic, respectable man. I would say he is an intellectual at this point. I love some of the conversations that we've had already and the way we connect with words. And it's someone that I want Elijah to know in my life. And that's why I'm excited to have him sitting with me today. So with great pleasure, I'm excited tonight to talk with my good friend, Josh Carr. Did I miss anything?
No, you did well. So I guess just Appalachian State. Some people might kill you in the comments. I don't know if you got what kind of fans you got, but
look, I don't. I went to school in Virginia, so
look, bro. And my degree was in was actually in was more organizational, more organizational psych because I have a minor in entrepreneurship, so those things lined up. So it's more organizational. But my focus and my actual specification going through college was child and family services. So I have a lot of different little things. Was born in New York, raised in North Carolina. Like Andrew said, we met in the dance community. He was somebody I really looked up to. He just seemed like he had it together. He's very cool. If you know him, he just has this cool energy.
Say it louder for the people in the back.
He's very cool.
Hear that, son?
And then now I'm in LA. Like you said, did some professional dance work in the industry. It was cool.
And you're signed too, aren't you?
I was signed for a while to Clear Talent Group. I'm not anymore. They represented me extremely well. They really, really advocated for me and tried to support me in my interests. But when I started thinking more about production and started really enjoying creating content and developing my own things, our goals just didn't line up. So it was actually a cool conversation when I actually left. So,
yeah, that's really good.
So then,
we've actually lost touch a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's actually one of the cooler ways for me to keep up with you because I get to see the wins, right? And so to me, you have this movie kind of life, this social media life. I'm like, okay, he's doing some really good things, and you're so busy. We just talked about how you are looking to write a book, right?
Yeah.
You're involved with children and kids, and I think that's so important because you study for it. You put time in with it. It's not just for the gram, I have a picture with a puppy or something, right? This is something that you're really passionate about. And I caught some of the recent conversations. Like yesterday, you were speaking with Domino.
Yeah, shout out to Domino.
Yeah, and I was really, really impressed with both sides of the conversation. And with everything going on, we originally, when I talked to you, I wanted to talk more about personal growth, finances, things I know you've spoken on before in the past, things that are important for people to understand when they're growing up. Yeah. But, in the climate we're in right now, it would be disrespectful to not talk about some things we're going to talk about today. And to not take the opportunity to speak with somebody who is well-read like you, who is articulate, who
getting there,
but who's gracious enough to talk with me. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have our different experiences, but I do want to put a disclaimer out there for anyone listening. And I'll let Josh whatever he needs to say in a second, but anything I ask on this episode is because I generally don't know and I want the knowledge. So if I say something dumb and ignorant or something completely wrong, just know that I'm okay with that because I'm looking for the right answer. And I'm hoping that you're okay with that because at the end of the day, the right answers are things that I want my son Elijah to know.
Facts.
Yeah.
And to that point, yeah, bro, like, I think that this is the time, just like you said, it would behoove us to have this kind of conversation, especially after so much time, just speaking about what's really happening. And the cool thing is everything else I'm learning with like the self-development and like the finance and even just down to like, different habits and stuff kind of all relate to the things that we're thinking about, or in my opinion, the things that I'm learning have now given me a better like scope to see the overall issue. So all those things will still relate. And yeah, bro, if anything comes up, I definitely will let you know. If anything is like inappropriate, but you're a smart guy, so I'm not expecting you to come out of pocket. So
no, I mean, I would never intentionally do it, right? I think you know that about me, and we have a good enough relationship.
Definitely.
But I wouldn't mind getting to a point where I'm asking something dumb because I want to know where that limit is. I think that's where the growth is. And I think about last night, I was talking to Taylor, my wife. I was like, I am nervous going into this conversation, not because I don't want to talk to you. I'm nervous because I don't want to misstep, but it's important, I think, to have the courage to do this right now because I know other people are doing it, and I know that you'll catch me in this this race.
Oh yeah, I got your back.
Yeah. So, originally, I was going to ask the question, how do my son be better allies, right? And I watched the conversation yesterday with Domino, and I understood right away why that question wasn't the right question to ask.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about that real quick?
Yeah, no doubt. Just for the listeners, since you can't see my face, I am a Black man. In case you can like pick that up. I'm also I was raised in North Carolina. So, and the way I preface Domino's conversation, and I think it's important to preface this conversation, is first we got to acknowledge that Black people don't exist in as a monolith. So my ideas are based on my experience and my background, and also anecdotal evidence and things I've shared with other people in our community, as well as things that I've read and researched. So that's where I'm coming from. My ideas in general I think they line up most with Pan-Africanism, which is the idea that brown people everywhere, really, so in Africa and in Europe and in Antarctica and in the United States, like we all got to really come together. And that's a lot of like Marcus Garvey and Huey Newton and those kind of guys. Even Malcolm X towards like the end was really a lot more Pan-Africanist. So just so people understand what my stance is in general before, so you can kind of get that. And just, to Andrew's point, and a good place to start is the problem with the question, or the problem with non-Black people asking Black people like what I can do, or like what should I be doing, like that question. Unintentionally, I believe, but it takes responsibility off of like the asker, right? Off the person asking the question.
100%.
Yep. Because, it's like, well, yeah, you just give me like a quick and a clean answer. Firstly. And then secondly, I think it takes the power away from the person asking the question, because my response to that is, well, yeah, what do you do? How do I leverage your skills, or how do I leverage your privilege in order to like really enact the system? And so that's number two. And then number three, it just shows me that that person maybe doesn't have a good context for what the struggle is and the different aspects of the struggle. And so if someone were to come and ask me, I'm really gonna, I'm gonna really ask them, what do you do, or what are you bringing to the table? And then that will really let me know where people are going. And unfortunately, like I was saying yesterday on the live, and I don't want to spend like another 2 hours on your program talking about all of it, but a lot of people, specifically definitely white people, but non-Black people in general, and even other people of color that aren't Black. Unfortunately, the people that are a little bit more to the right, or who are moderate, and I'll explain what I mean in terms of being moderate, they tend to allow their inactivity to speak for the people who are maybe a little bit more motivated or energized. But unfortunately, they usually also leave you standing with the smoking gun when it's time for like, essentially for us to point out the ops to let people know who's like really not with it. So I was using the example yesterday that it's difficult to have a conversation about race and racism because racism is actually a structural thing. A lot of the times we talk about we're fighting people's racist ideas and no, what we're really fighting and we're talking people's minds is prejudice, which is a different thing than racism, which is a different thing than discrimination and which is a different thing than oppression, and all those things kind of come together. But a lot of people aren't even as informed enough to use the vernacular properly. So when we say like, I want to, we got to teach people something other than racism, it's like, well, no, you can't teach someone something other than racism, because racism isn't something that's taught. Prejudice is taught and racism is enacted. Racism is like the actual outcomes or the effects of the system, like systematic oppression, systematic racism, institutionalized racism. So we talk about things going as far back in history as like redlining. We think about things of like the whole Jim Crow area, the Black codes. We think about things like if we don't understand concepts like the ways that African Americans migrated and moved throughout the countries and the different times and the ways that we saw like industry being built, it's like, that's like a lot, but that's the reality of a situation. And that was just a taste. And for somebody like me, I know that there's like way more that I don't know than I do know, but just even for any listeners out there, especially non-Black people, if you weren't able to kind of keep up with that conversation, and that was a point that I made a lot on the live, if you're not able to really keep up with, and I think that I'm on like maybe like the bottom level. There's people out there who are way, way more intelligent and can kind of really connect the dots and provide context more effectively. But if you're having trouble following the conversation, that tells you that you probably don't understand the struggle. So the reality is, and I think where we have a lot of it messed up, and we have a lot of it messed up because the system is intentionally like misinforming us. A lot of it's messed up in thinking that we have to, fight. Like we have to change racism, and that is a whole systematic issue. And so we would have to understand all the different parts of the system, how they interact with people, and how they connect to the system, and then we can start to delineate what really matters. So, for all my people who are wondering, like, well, I'm still maybe not sure, that's kind of a good thing, I would encourage you just to dive into something that makes you feel something. There's an issue or there's like an article that you read that just like really makes your blood boil. So maybe it's the way protesters are being treated, or maybe it's the way that businesses are being treated. Maybe it is police brutality. Maybe it's actually prison reform. Maybe it's like, well, I don't really feel like dealing with any of that, but I'm wondering what these kids are going through. How do we make sure these kids are taken care of? Like whatever your interest is, then you go and you look in that specific direction and you see what systems are in place in that area and how they're affecting Black people and people of color in general. But today I will be speaking pretty much just for Black people because I can't speak for other communities.
Sure, yeah.
And then you really look at it in a big picture way and you say, okay, well, if I'm looking at education, then I have to think about the way resources are distributed. I got to think about what's actually being taught. I got to think about where these schools are located. Think about like, how do we make sure that kids, they eat, when they're at school, when they leave school, all this like kids can't graduate because they got lunch fines, and the fact that kids still have to pay for school is crazy, but there's somebody out there who's like really, really geeked about it.
Yeah.
And they're going to be really well suited to allow their passion to like feed them. Like you got to go and get the information, learn, read the history, look for the people who are speaking about this. There's like so much out there. And then from there, you can come to a Black person with something in your hand and say, hey, I've been looking at education reform and this is what I learned. And through my, whatever, I met this person. This person's a lawyer. This person works, is a councilman, maybe not in our state, but said they would help us write little, whatever, petitions, legislature, whatever it is. And then you say, like, how can I help? Like, this is what I have. And now what do you want me to do with this? And then Black people, we can really say, well, me, I wouldn't know where to tell you to go with something like that. But I do know where to send you. And so then I can say, hey, so-and-so, this person's coming to you. This is what I know they have. And so I think they're going to be able to help. So it's really it's more about taking it upon yourself to learn. But the problem is a lot of the information isn't as readily available. And so I don't hold it against people. But just like we were saying earlier, it is people's responsibility to take it upon themselves.
Yeah.
I know that was a long answer.
No, it's good. And I think there's a lot to unpack there. And I want to touch on a lot of parts of that. But
let's get into it.
Continue on that point is, you said something that was so important to me is to come and ask just the basic question of, how do I be a better ally, or what can I do, or, something like that. It's lazy, right? I mean, it does take time to go do the work. And during our conversation yesterday, I was trying to figure out how to articulate it. And everyone has different skills, right?
Yeah.
And so you got to figure out how to leverage those skills. And one of the things that was tough for me just recently, kind of checking myself and beliefs and and having conversations with other people, because I think innately most of us want to help and want to do more. And I think that's an important place to start too, is there was the conversation of relinquishing your power, right? And
yeah, man,
this is a touchy one, but I want to make sure I get this right here, Josh, because I feel like as an Asian man, I have certain privileges that are not white privilege. They're different in its own right.
Yes, they are.
My initial thought is I don't want to give it up. I want to use it and weaponize it. I don't want to say weaponize it, but I want to be able to use it and mobilize it. But weaponize is fine.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what you're
what the intent is, right? But I want to be able to use it for the purpose, because if I give it up, then everything that I've used or taken advantage of was for naught. Am I close here? Am I?
Yeah, you're right. What I tell people all the time is, and something I broke down on a live too, so maybe it will be useful for this, is that everyone exists in the system of racism. If you were born in the United States, if you moved here at any point, if you've lived here more than maybe 6 months, it's a good chance that you've been indoctrinated. And so people who grow up in this system also, I'm a Black man, right? But I have prejudices in my mind that I have to unwork about Black people, about Asian people, about Latino people, about
oh sure, yeah,
and it also it kind of sections off too, right? Because even within Black people, they make us feel differently about poor Blacks, to feel differently about people who are homeless, to people who are dealing with mental health issues, and so I want everyone to know that everyone has these issues, right? Everyone has some ideas and some things they have to work. Again, prejudices are really in your brain, which are a product of the racist system enforcing certain messages and reoccurring, and obviously it sits in your subconscious. So in that way, it is, everyone has a little bit of power, but it's really more like, how close are you standing to the center? And the center being maybe where the power is actually at. So if we think about it almost like waves or like ripples in a pond, you throw the rock in and it ripples out. Yeah. That immediate first ripple is probably is white people. And obviously, as you get farther away, you're going to get more poor and more marginalized. So maybe you're gay, or you're a veteran, or you're disabled. And so as you go out, and then that next tier might be Asians, or it might be obviously so. And I don't know what the actual structure would be, but to your point, you don't have white privilege, but you do have a certain amount of privilege that I just wouldn't get. And so also in that way, I think that you also have to understand that you have privilege in your community as well. I was speaking with an Asian woman at the park today, and she was saying, "Oh, I don't know how to get my parents on board." And I was like, well, if your parents aren't going to get on board, we got to keep moving. We don't have time to try to convince people.
That's powerful.
There's so much information that's out there. But I told her, I said, but you can mobilize, and you can energize people who maybe were a little bit more to the right, who are now leaning a little bit more moderately, or who are now seeing these things and maybe speaking up. So you as an Asian in your community can speak to other Asians in your community and really spread good information and really like uplift voices. The fact that you said, well, I took some things and I shared it out and I got a good response. That's powerful, because I can't necessarily go into your community saying, here's what you need to know.
Right.
But you can give it the cosign. So when I'm saying like you give up your power when you ask, what can I do? You don't really see how powerful you are in your own way just because you identify in different communities. And I mean, so it's really about looking at the different communities that you really exist in, especially any that are marginalized, and thinking about how you can leverage those positions, because you're also like a veteran too. So it's like, well, there are certain things that me as like a non-veteran, certain messages I won't be able to get across. And so if there are things that really identify with you, you could be looking at veterans who are ready, who are like, oh my gosh, it doesn't make sense. I'm not sure what to do. Especially if they're Asian, because then you're hitting like this, you're hitting like this double sweet spot, right?
Right.
And so it's really about working in that way, about not thinking that there's one correct answer or like there's one correct way. There's one correct direction, certainly, but it's going to take a lot of little movements and a lot of like cooperation. And so that's what I mean by not giving up your power, is that just from you being in a community that I'm not in, you have access in that way. And then because you're closer, so to speak, to the center in terms of the overall power structure, you have power that you can leverage in that way too.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's a term that I've heard recently, and I had to do my homework right on it.
Nice.
And I was listening to, I'm sorry if I said it wrong. Is it Ibram or Ibram?
Who?
Ibram. Is it Ibram X?
You know what? I'm not sure.
So, he has this book called, like How to Be Anti-Racist, right? Mm-hmm, and the term anti-racist, and he breaks down the fact that
Ibram, definitely. I'm with you now.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're good. But he talks about the idea of you can be racist or you can be anti-racist. But to be I'm not racist is complicit into the structure of racism. And that hit really, really hard for me, because a lot of the conversation, not even lately, just in general, is, who's on the sidelines, right? Yeah. So you said before, like, are we down a rock with you? But when things are getting crazy, like, do we really stand with you?
That's a fact.
What are your feelings on anti-racism? Because the wording is
it's tough,
violent, and it needs to be.
Yeah.
Right. It's controversial. Yeah. It's combative, like anti-racist.
It is it is combative.
But it doesn't. It needs to be.
Yeah, I agree. I agree too. I think that we spoke yesterday about being moderate, and I had mentioned it really briefly earlier. So I think this may be like a good place to kind of just sprinkle that.
Okay.
And what I mean when I'm saying being moderate is not necessarily, I know that there's an actual like political identity or maybe like a marker for moderates. So that's not necessarily what I'm talking about. What I mean is you can't be moderate in your dedication to see things happen. So
say one more time. Say one more time, because I think that's important.
Yeah, you can't be moderate in your dedication to see things happen. So I use the example on the live about going to the gym, right? It's like if my goal, and so I'm going to try to draw some parallels. If our goal, everybody says the goal is to like support Black Lives Matter, right? So let's just keep that in our brain and think about this in terms of moderation. So if our goal in terms of the gym is my goal, I'm telling myself is I want to be fit, or maybe I want to like be able to do like a sexy photo shoot, or I don't know, Tommy Hilfiger polo. I don't know, whatever your goal is, you have this thing you want to do.
Right.
And out of 7 days out the week, you go to the gym 2 days out the week. You still buying ice cream. You still, still drinking alcohol all the time.
Following me? Damn.
You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? But you don't have like an understanding, right? I would consider that as somebody who's maybe a little moderate. You're not really sure. You're not
lukewarm.
Dedicated. You're lukewarm, and we don't have time for it, right?
Yeah.
So in my opinion, I'm looking for people who, just to follow that same analogy, you're saying, okay, I want to go to the gym. You're researching your nutrition. You're like trying new foods because you're making sure I need certain vitamins, I need certain minerals, I need like more iron in my diet. I know that because I research and I understand where that comes from. You're looking up different workouts. So maybe before you didn't know nothing, but now you know how to do HIIT workouts. Now you know how to do body weight stuff. Now you know how to actually lift, and now you know about cardio, you know what I'm saying? And then, so then now you're consistent every day.
Yeah.
even if you're not in the gym every day, you're watching what you're eating, you're watching your intake, you're making sure that you're active in some way, that for me is somebody who's dedicated. So to our point, we were saying like people standing on the sidelines. I don't even mind people standing on the sidelines as long as they're there for a reason. Like you have to be there for a reason to be on the sidelines. And a lot of people just don't have that reason. And so what it takes for me, or what I'm looking for, or what I would be looking for, is if you're serious, you're going to make it your business a little bit every day. And it doesn't mean that every day you have to like make a long post, or every day you have to like spend your whole day, or like, but you can take 1 hour of Netflix and listen to a Black podcaster. You can go on YouTube and listen to a Black speaker. And if you want to get into like Malcolm X and like Marcus Garvey and like Stokely Carmichael and all these guys who are speaking from the past, that's a really good place to be. But you can also listen to like E.T., the hip hop preacher. You can listen to the Breakfast Club. I mean, that's Charlemagne, and that's DJ Envy and Angela Yee. Like they're talking about Black stories. You can go on your Instagram and maybe you unfollow some of these people that aren't supporting, that aren't giving you the energy that you need. And instead you go follow some more Black people. You follow some Black success pages, some Black finance pages. One of these pages that we keep donating to, don't just go and donate, follow their page, interact, engage, So it's about like it's an everyday thing, because what we're really talking about, especially with all of this like race stuff and Black Lives Matters, is we're really talking about justice. And in order to understand what that looks like, you have to really dig into it, and you have to be consistent. So it's not enough to just say, well, today I'm interested in it, because every day that I'm Black, I'm at risk. So that's just a fact. And so I would want people on our side in terms of like being allies. We use the word anti-racist, which is like a little bit aggressive, but it does need to be like if I'm like anti-illness, I'm not bringing nothing around me that can maybe make me sick. You know what I'm saying? Like, if I'm like anti anything, it really is about figuring out the different ways that these things interact with you, and making sure that not only in like your passive like action, like your mind, or like your acceptance, or, oh, well, I love everyone, so that's good enough. It's like, well, no, in your active daily behavior, you have to build the muscles and the skills of being an anti-racist. You have to read the literature. You have to practice. You have to study. You have to immerse yourself in more positive examples, in the same way that Black people do. Like non-Black people are getting the same amount, if not more, messages of anti-Blackness, especially through like the media, and then just through society as a whole, right? So unless you not only purge yourself of that, but then put more good things into your body. It's like when I was transitioning to being a vegan, it wasn't just about stop eating meat and milk and obviously all that stuff, right? It was really about introducing better things into my body as well. So that's what I think the anti-racist really comes from, is just like you said, it's not about saying, oh, well, I'm like, about it. It's about saying, no, I'm not with racism at all. And I'm doing everything that I can on a daily basis to unlearn the things that racism taught me, so that I can be more effective in the system.
Is that a new term? A new word?
Ish. A lot of and that's kind of my concern too, is we as a community, I think we have a tendency to want things to be like palpable for people, or like digestible.
Yeah.
We don't want to come off too spicy. I hear a lot of people say, well, it's not about being angry because they won't hear your position. And it's like, yes, it's a half and half for me. Because firstly, I don't think that, while I think that everyone has a voice and it's important that we share, when it's time to start speaking about our platform and our stance, we don't need emotional people in that place. We need qualified people who can speak
in a qualified way. I like that.
Through their emotions, And so, but that really depends on us delegating the right people. So that's not really like something that we could talk about in this way. Sure. But the second part of that really is like, again, we keep changing the way we would say things, like before, in like the time of like Nation of Islam, also the Panthers. It was like we're anti-white and not anti-white people, but we're anti like whiteness, the system. And so now I think that anti-racism is a more accurate understanding of what we're going at. I'm wary when I see the vernacular change so much, because if people can't speak the language, again, we were talking about, if you don't have the context, you can't speak, it's hard to communicate. So when I see new terms and new things pop up sometimes, I think it serves to maybe like siphon off some people because they may not identify. But again, it's something that it has existed. I think that the aggressiveness of it is
the concepts existed.
The concept has definitely existed. And I mean, but you can also hear like Brother Malcolm, who's somebody I read a lot of, or even Martin Luther King talk about not being anti-white, but being anti the system, being like anti-capitalism, being like, and so in that same way, we're all really talking about the same things, but that vernacular is kind of new-ish from what I know, but I could be wrong.
When I was reading it, it seems like a very simple concept, right? Mm-hmm. To a very complex problem, right? And so I remember, the story of like, growing up and, a dad going, "Hey, is your room clean?" And the son going, "Oh, it's pretty clean." And then dad going, "What does that even mean?" Mm-hmm. It's either clean or it's dirty. And there are varying degrees of dirty, but there's only one way to be clean.
That's true.
To me, that's how it read when I was, doing my homework on racist versus anti-racist. And if you're in the middle somewhere, where's your complicity in it? But that's kind of how I was getting it. But then I was shocked because I was like, why don't I know more of this? Like, why wasn't I fed this? Why do I have to go get this? Like, why am I've heard redlining, right?
Yeah.
I've heard New Deal. I've heard federal, the Homes Act, right? Like the, like all of it, right? Like, why isn't that in the textbook?
Yeah.
Because I mean, I know we're getting heavy right now, but it's just,
you're right.
The conversation is always like, well, show me a system like show me where in the system that it's there. And I didn't have the tools. I was like, I guess you're right. Like, I don't know anything. But when you look at it and you actually don't take it for, what it were, but actually look it up online. You can go read the documents. It is crazy, for lack of a better term, black and white, how racist the documents are. Like, why don't I know this? Like, can I ask like a real question?
Yeah.
Did you grow up knowing that, or did you get schooled on that somewhere?
Gotcha. Oh, so you're saying, did I grow up was I handed this information, or did I have to go and seek it? Or you're talking about in terms of, okay, no, I'll answer your question. I know where you're at.
Yeah.
I grew up Black. So growing up Black, I had to learn things that other people didn't have to learn. I had to learn.
Sure.
And so in that way, it's like a half and half. And I was lucky that my parents were both educated people. My mom has 2 degrees. My dad has 1. And growing up, and we also kind of grew up kind of suburban. We were hood adjacent. Some I like to say, because pretty much around the corner, where all our homies stayed, was like, the hood, so to speak, at least in Concord. Yeah. And, as you move into Charlotte, it's like, different, obviously. But I grew up Black. So I had to know certain things about being a Black man in the South, and also being interested in like knowledge and like arts. I've always been into like music and dance, theater, reading, poetry. So because I was interested in those things, my parents really knew that they had to really teach me what that was about. So we didn't necessarily get, and in retrospect, now I'm thinking about the things my parents had around the house. It existed. My parents were aware of it. They didn't really press it on us, but they made sure the literature and those kind of things were present for us. But the reality is, once I started getting older and I recognized the mechanisms, I was able to accept the mechanisms a lot earlier than I think maybe most other people were,
But when you're that young, do you even realize that there's another way of life? Like, do you even realize like there's another set of rules out there?
Oh, I'll tell you a story. That's a good question. Because at first, no, you don't. No, you don't. I was in first grade. I went to Weddington Hills Elementary School. I won't say my teacher's name because I think she handled it the best she could have. But
oh my gosh, I think I know where the story is going, and it hurts my heart already.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. There was a girl. Her name was, I'm not gonna say her name, but there was a girl who was white in my class, and me being a young black man, I was attracted to this girl, right? Sure. But there was another black male in my class who was lighter than I was, and so he also liked this girl, and so on the same day at like this, whatever, like end of the year party type thing, he had kissed this girl on the cheek, and so I was like. We were in first grade, so we're doing too much. But the point is, he kissed this girl on the cheek. He was like, "This is my girlfriend." And so, me being like a younger man, I was like, "No, I'm gonna kiss this girl on the cheek. This is my girlfriend." And she was like, obviously a young woman. In retrospect, I'm like, "Fuck!" Like, I wish I could have grabbed my younger self up. But obviously, this young girl was upset, right? She was like, "Fuck, I wasn't ready for any of this." And I'm sorry, I'm cursing a lot on your podcast, but so she went and told the teacher, but I'm the only one that got in trouble. Like, yeah, like I got the parents got called on me. Like I had to sit in the office, and I remember vividly. And my mom came and picked me up from school that day, which was I used to get phone calls home all the time. I was like an energetic kid, so I was used to the phone call. I used to sit in the office. So, but my mom came that day and picked me up, and I thought it was kind of odd. And then that day, she was like, "Sweetie, you can't be that reckless." And it wasn't like that serious. And as I got older, my mom made a point of revisiting that. And once I got older to understand, she was like, "Look, I'm like dark skinned black in the South." And she's like, "There's certain things that you just can't, you're not going to be able to get away with, And so then as I got older, I started seeing that even though I was smarter than a lot of people in my class, even though I felt like I was maybe a little bit more qualified for certain things, I was definitely engaging more. And so through middle school and high school, I saw that started to separate. And so then I just had to educate myself, because I was like, well, no, I recognize that the system exists, but there has to be more that I don't know. So to answer your question, I was like a long way around the question, but to answer your question, like, no, we're not born obviously knowing those things exist, but very early on for a lot of us, we start to see, and then, even if we think about our images in media and those kind of things, like from a young age, I knew, even if I wasn't super aware of it. In that way, though, I had to really go and seek and learn. My mother named me Joshua Malcolm Carr. So she always like really reinforced this, like my middle name and like what my namesake really stands for. I remember when I was young, we watched the Malcolm X movie with Denzel Washington as a family. And, and then that really opened up a lot for me, because in that was the first time I maybe had like seen the truth. So then after that, it was just diving. And I think that information doesn't exist readily, because it would give people a proper understanding of what this country really is doing. And if I'm the country, right? Like if the country is a person, all of the stuff that they're hiding away essentially were all the mistakes that the country made. You know what I mean? And we're talking about places that they lost control, ways that the government acted outside of its interests. And then also, if you can't connect the dots, you can't see everything together. So I'm not going to teach you, like I'll teach you the slaves got free, and I'll teach you that there was this big immigration to Ellis Island, and then all of a sudden people were all over the country, right?
That's what you're saying, yeah.
And we learn all these things separately, but they won't teach you all the middle, So we talked about post-slavery, Jim Crow organizations. We talked about like the Freedmen's Bank yesterday, and then how that relates to immigration and what Black people were doing in the North with people who are also immigrating. And then when people started moving west, how were they actually able to do that? And so when we're able to answer those kind of questions for ourselves, then we start to really see the structure in the way that it actually works. And it allows us to see the patterns as they continue to repeat, because a system is built and it's maintained, or like maybe maintenance. If it was a machine, somebody goes in with like a wrench and just fixes it every once in a while, but it hasn't been dismantled and like rebuilt. So the founding fathers set this up in a way that there's like enough wiggle room to where people can like adjust and amend as new industries come into place. So we know that racism still exists, and we know the system is super strong because now there's racism in like cyberspace, in like technology, and heavy, not only in the actual sector, but also, you know, like we used to do a Google search of a good person, a good man, or a Google search of a bad man. You know what I mean? So but if we knew everything and understood how to connect the dots, then it would A, show us the system is bull, and then it would B, show us that everything that they're telling us that we have to fight for, we've already kind of accomplished, in my opinion. You know, like people who are like, oh, well, we need to bring everyone together and make sure and create unity. It's like, well, we've had that in the past. There were organizations that existed that were Black, Asian, Hispanic, Native American, white, like across the board. And it's happened. People are like, oh, we need our own space in our own communities. It has happened, you know, and it's happened in the past. But if you understand the past, then you know where you need to move forward. Like, you know, like it's a very cliche, but like,
no, it makes sense. 100%.
You're doomed to repeat the past if you don't understand it. And so it's the same way we get stuck in a loop because the system is giving us information. And then it's like the system is also creating actions or creating evidence that would support the misinformation. But everything is a lie. Like everything is actually a lie. And so, but the lies are all connected. So if they would teach us accurately what happened, of course, there would be some of us that wouldn't be obviously interested. Some people would still stay on that like middle ground. But if you could go to your library and read about like Marcus Garvey, if you could read about like the positions of the Panthers, anybody, you know, and because of the internet now, we do have that access, which is why I'm saying people just got to go and do it. But if that was a standard course of study, the system would be able to maintain.
Do you think then, so he also talks a little bit about how this gets a little deep and gets a little wonky. So I'm going to ask you for a little help here. Okay.
Gotcha. Let's get into it.
So he talks about, maybe it was him or maybe it was his other book called The Miseducation, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So Wilson talks specifically about how to get out, it takes Black leaders in the community to get out. Mm-hmm. Is that true? How do you feel about that? Because, and here's why I asked the question. And I think it's important and I agree with it. I ask it also because when people say they want to help, I want to differentiate or delineate away the guilt or the savior complex, right? Because I think it's important. I think if we go in as a resource, you know, we have to understand that if it does take someone from the inside to make change, then we have to respect that. But I wanted to know your thoughts and opinion on that.
My opinion on that is complicated. Okay. Because on one side, I definitely see myself as, in terms of like my political ideologies, I see myself as like a Pan-Africanist. That's the closest way I can identify, right? But in terms of like my spiritual or like life understanding, I'm like a universalist. I don't know if that's like a thing, but I really believe that same atoms, same electrons, and you know, all that stuff, neutrons, protons, energy cannot be created or destroyed. So anything that exists now has existed for forever, and we're literally all the same stuff. Yeah. So I try to honor both of those places. So I'll kind of answer for both of those places.
Okay.
On one side, in terms of the political, like my political ideologies, I agree 100%. It takes Black leaders in our communities that are specialized and qualified to handle particular issues. It won't take just one Black leader. In fact, I think it would take a number of small organized specialty groups in different areas to address different issues. So whatever our platforms are, if our platforms are education, or at least like, I like to think about it in trying to really be realistic. So way down the line, in an ideal world, we either have separate states where Black people have direct access to resources, and not saying that there's some rhetoric around that's like, and make it like only Black. I don't know if I really agree with that for a number of reasons. We'll talk about those too, but the idea.
Just to clarify, are you talking like a Black Idaho?
Like a Black Idaho. Yeah,
okay.
That's one side of and that would be like anti-integrationist, which again, we don't know that there was a large group of anti-integrationists during the civil rights movement that were speaking about a lot of things that the civil rights leaders were also speaking about. So again, it really comes down to this misinformation, because if you knew that there was something in common, but the anti-integrationists were pretty much just saying like the whole 40 acres and a mule thing is great. Just, give us Idaho, give us Oklahoma, and let us do our thing. Let us build our industry because it's going to work. In my way, I think that the most effective way would be like, you can go to almost any like major city or like where you have a diverse population density, and you can see smaller communities that are outlined almost, like you can see like the historic like Asian district. You can see little
like
China,
Chinatown.
Like,
you got little Jamaica.
I'm saying
right, like little Haiti. Right. Like I get it. Yeah,
you feel what I'm saying. So in my way, I think that I would like to see like a pop up of like numerous Black cities, like little this and little that just kind of raise their flag in that way. But it takes us as Black people to have our leaders understand our positions first, because those people are the ones who then go to like the median and tell all the people who are riding with us what to do. Like the agenda can't come from the Asian community. The agenda can't come from the white community. And I don't believe the agenda can come from a conglomerate as it applies to Black people and Black lives. So I think that the reality is Black people need to come together, and something that we don't have, and Killer Mike speaks on. So this isn't necessarily my individual thought, but when he said it, it really just blew my mind.
He's so smart.
We don't have like a 10-point program like the Panthers did. You know what I mean? And so when people come to say, well, how can I help? The reality is we have to say, I don't know, because we don't have.
I mean, are we borderline right now on the idea of an agenda?
Well, I think when we talk about, the question was, well, in order to make change, like, do you think we need Black leaders? And then the answer is yes. And the Black leaders need an agenda. The Black community needs an agenda. Like, we need to know what we want from the system and what we don't want from the system, because I think that people aren't sure. And again, there's a miseducation. So unless you know about like Black Wall Street in Tulsa, unless you know about cities like that were affluent, like Detroit and like Charleston, and there's a handful of cities, Jacksonville at one time was like really Black. So unless you know about these places, obviously Atlanta and like New Orleans, these places, unless you know about them and you know that there have been in the past Black communities, you think that what we need is someone to help us build those things. Whereas we've been doing that for a while. Yeah. So I am saying that we need an agenda as in like Killer Mike says it really well. He says, no matter how you identify, if you're Black, we agree on these 10 things, at least for the next 2 or 3 years, that if we get these things rolling, it'll make space for us to hit other little marginalized groups. And then any politician or any ally or anything, they would have to agree to points 1 through 10 and be able to say what points they can actually help us leverage. So I think that it takes Black leaders in the community to organize the community, to really assess the need, and then to create a plan for like actually going through and dealing with that structure.
That's powerful.
So that's me as obviously like my political ideology, but as a universalist, and then also still kind of a political way, we still need everyone else if we're really interested in unity. Like that answer handles the problems for the Black community, because then we decide what we need to do. So we say we can handle 1 through 7, but we need some help with 3 through 10. So then now we know as a concerted effort how we can go and we can speak and who can speak for us. And we all agree that these are our issues. But I think on the other hand, and we're talking about unity, if the country really wants us all to be together, then it does take each individual community taking an anti-racist stand.
Sure.
Like, and right now we're focused on Black lives. But at a point, it was the Asian community that was being discriminated against. Not less than a year ago, it was like the Latino community that was being discriminated against, And so the problem is the country can keep separating us because we aren't as unified as individual communities, in terms of like actual like human interest. And I think that in that way, once we kind of get it together and once we can really like energize and like engage with people of other communities who are really interested in seeing unity, then the work needs to be done in every community, to be honest. So the Asian community will get together and say, okay, well, as Asians in America, what's our access to privilege and how do we leverage that? Who are we interested in helping and what do we want to see from ourselves? And every community needs to do that. So the community is strengthened. And then we as like a people, as like an American people who are interested in seeing things happen, not the people who are already over it. Like we need to really be working with people who are actually interested in helping see things grow. So if you're anti-racist and you're like pro-Black and you're like real about it and you're in the Asian community, then once the Black community comes out and our leaders start to speak and our leaders say, okay, here's what we need, who can help, then you have to be that person to say, well, as someone who is anti-racist, this is how I can help. And then it becomes not so much. I know a lot of people are like, we got to help Black people. And I'm like, yeah, kind of. But the bigger problem is the system of racism. And so as a whole, in general, Black people have been the most vocal and have documented the system the most. So I think that's why we get a lot of the responsibility, which is fair. But everyone that's not straight, white, and rich is at risk of being chopped, So, to answer your question, definitely Black leaders. Yes. Because we have to know what we want first before we can, you're in the military. It's like, if your like commanding officer doesn't understand the plan, he can't very well delegate, to the next.
We're going to go start shooting everything.
Exactly. And I think that that's kind of what we're seeing out in society right now is people are flailing, so to speak. And I don't think it's unreasonable because I can't criticize unless I can give you a better alternative. So I can't say, hey guys, stop that, unless I can say this person has an agenda and we're working on it. And this is why whatever you're doing is either like proactive or like counterproductive for for that mission. So it's we need more Black leaders, bro. We need more Black leaders. And I think that we need a variety of Black leaders. It's not just about someone who could speak like a Malcolm X. Because Malcolm was backed by the Fruit of Islam and a lot of members of a Nation of Islam, until later he went and formed his own organization, but he always had help. So it's about using people. Again, I'm going to keep going back to it, using people where they're strong and finding the most qualified and the most believable. Ray Dalio used this term in Principles called believability. And it's the idea that over time you have the evidence that you've practiced this enough to be successful. You have like a positive yield and you have like the actual experience to be able to pivot. So we need the leaders who are like specialized in their fields and in their areas. And then all the different leaders will come together and then maybe we'll have like 1 or 2 figureheads. But I think it's really about small grassroots organizations working in cooperation.
I think that's a great answer. Romantic even, right?
Thanks, man.
But I think it's important to do. And I appreciate how you talked a little bit about, starting from the ground up, from within, and then also talked about how it falls into the big picture, right? Because I think that's a problem with the conversation of like assimilation, right? Because assimilation is from the larger agenda, right? From the larger group's agenda of, hey, here's how you get in. And that doesn't always work. I mean, we talk about from a medical standpoint, like, transplants being rejected, right? For one reason or another. And I think that's kind of what happens. And so you start to mention a little bit about the different cultures and different pockets of people. And I would love to talk a little bit about, and let's have a great kind of conversation about this is, where is the Asian Black relationship? Historically, what have you seen? What do you see on it? And I think this is where I might be able to help out a little bit more in the conversation. But I think it's important because I'll start off with just you saying, Josh, I love you and I'm with you.
Right? I already know what's up. Yeah. And to be honest, I don't really know a lot about Asian and Black relations as they pertain to like America or like history. I do know that unfortunately, because Western ideas and capitalism have spread across the country, there's a lot of anti-Blackness internationally. So in Asian countries, we still even see anti-Blackness. We saw a lot during COVID. People Asian store owners not letting Black people in, or actively discriminating against.
Asians are the racist.
Putting up signs.
They're the most.
I mean, but also it's like it's a half and half, because I'm like Asia, and I know like a little bit about like Asian history and like the way like Asia developed. Asia was like for a long time was able to maintain its culture, even though Western ideals were being pressed upon them. Okay. At least from what I understand. And obviously there was like a blending, but there's like a lot of pride in maintaining like those cultural bonds. And that's just based off of what I can see out in like the world. Or even like I have some Asian friends, and I've been able to be around their families, and there's like I see similar emphasis on like family and on like gratitude and on like togetherness and on like ideas of community. And so in that way, I think that the Black community can really learn some stuff from the Asian community, at least in the way that Asian community has worked in America. In a lot of other marginalized communities. But what we see, especially economically from the Asian community, is there's an interest in maintaining like the Asian dollar and like building Asian communities and like making sure that people are educated in like a proper way. And there's like you're like, we're doing this for the future kind of mentality. Or at least based on what I may be ignorant, but based on what I've seen, is a lot of it is like, well, or I have like Asian friends who are like, I want to make sure that I'm cool, so that when my parents are ready to retire, I can make sure.
That's huge.
And that's something
even in this generation now. I'm a young professional now, and it's not like my parents are struggling. My dad retired from the military; he's doing okay. But in the back of my mind, still, I always go, what if something happens? Am I going to be able to take care of them? And to your point, I think that's strong. And so there is a lot of future talk, in the Asian community. And I'm not a spokesperson. I'm just talking about my own experience, right? But
yeah, no, for sure.
But I was thinking, one of the things that we've been able to do as far as my generation, my peers right now, is we've been able to kind of shut up and get to work.
Yeah.
Right. We joke around about how Asians are all nurses and doctors. And that's kind of put us on an early reason. And I was like, okay, well, in my mind, that's a great thing. And, sometimes we don't want to do it, but we do it for the family. And there is a level of hierarchy within the Asian culture that's like, I'm going to take care of the legacy. I think it's more right. But then putting the context of everything else, right, is I've come to realize that we've been able to do that because the Black community has been our big brother. And I say this, and this is something that I thought about yesterday. And Asian community, I know you're going to check me on this, but this is how I feel about it, is I feel like the Black community have been our big brothers. They're the one that took the spanking.
Mm-hmm.
They're the one that started with the culture that we came in on, and we wanted to be like them growing up.
Mm-hmm.
They took the whooping, and then we got to get to work.
Well, I think to that point too, bro, there was a time where, and again, we talked about why they don't teach us the right shit, right?
Yeah.
There was a time where our people worked together and lived together.
Oh yeah, 100%.
You know, like we talk about, you know, I know the railroads are like definitely like an easy example, but there was a whole like yellow man, black man rhetoric. So,
oh yes,
Asians were at one time the first group of immigrants who were treated, well, I mean, European immigrants were too, but they switched that up real quick when they saw that they could take advantage of their white skin. But the Asian community, specifically like at that time, historically, the Chinese and Japanese Americans were the first ones to really feel the racism. Like,
oh yeah,
like
I mean,
really
you know, in the history books, there's always the colored and the white water fountain.
Yeah.
There's also the, hey, no dogs, no chickens, no Koreans.
That's what I mean.
Right.
That's what I mean. So there was a time where we were walking around and we could really, I mean, we could even talk about internment camps. Like,
oh yeah,
you know, and so I think that culturally we have a closer understanding of how things really are working, right?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, just like they did with the poor whites, they convinced Asians that they are more successful if they separate from Black people. Like, you know, because we see all the immigrants coming in at Ellis Island, like the Irish and German and all these things, right? But the immigrants were treated and were policed and were brutalized in the same way that Black people were in the North, because they live in the same communities. They did a lot of the same stuff. So when they started building all these suburbs, started moving people out west, right? Then they started saying, well, the issue is not the fact that you're an immigrant. It's Black and it's white, which is why now you could be Irish and German and all these other things and still check the white box on the little, you know, on the.
Well, that's why even as an Asian, we're one of the two. We're the lesser of evils, right? So we get that pass.
Mm-hmm.
We get to fly under the radar. And so that's, I had to check myself. I'm like, I never thought about that. Like, okay, why am I able to do this? Why am I able to go on? Right. And it's right. And the reason why I use the big brother analogy is, one, because we're family oriented. Right. Yeah. But then two, like I said, growing up, like whether we knew or not, we were taking a lot from the culture, right? Like we don't have Asian entertainment TV, right? We grew up watching BET. Right. Let's call it what it is. Like I'm a dancer. True, I came straight out of the hip hop, like real hip hop culture of New York. Yeah. And like everything. Like I get that. Right. And I have a respect for it. But a lot of people just kind of take it for granted that we fly under the radar. And so, yeah. And I that's what I'm saying. Like I understand the stressors or like the call outs of where are you at now?
Right.
Right. And I'm not sure where we go from there.
I think just to your point about the big brother, because that's important too. And I just want to make one more point on that. And we'll talk about where we go now. Again, Asians in general, internationally, were able to understand because they were also the oppressive regimes had were like holding on to them too in different countries, you know what I'm saying? Also in America. So what we saw though is, again, the system came in and convinced Asians, because Asians are really, really successful in industry. I mean, the Asian dollar is one of like the biggest, has historically been, and one of like the biggest dollars. Asian money stays in the community, like something like the longest duration. Like the Asian dollar is really, really powerful. And you guys came in and really started building industry. And again, skilled laborers, in the same way that when the slaves left slavery, they had to do all these things that made them now like a higher skilled class. Asians coming across, especially immigrants at the time, were coming from communities where they had to do everything, right? So you had this high like skilled labor class. Right. And then, the government came in and convinced them well, you're better off. You're better off if you leave them alone. And the way that happened was they started kind of buying people off. So it's like, well, you and your family want to do some stuff, so we'll pay for that corner shop that you want to do. We'll pay for, we'll give you some money to get on your feet, make sure your kids can go to college. But we're going to move you out of that community. We're going to move you in this community, and you can't. And these are the rules you have to follow. So over time, because there was an interest, and again, we were together. And so the Asian dollar plus the black dollar would have really rocked this fucking country.
Right.
And so then they separated us. Even though, again, you're saying like things like hip hop. I think Asians really understand hip hop because, again, they are some of the more oppressed people that also don't come from here, obviously. And that's why I think Latinos can relate to hip hop and like really get into it, is because it's really like hip hop is the culture of the struggle and is the culture of the people. And That's why a lot of people relate. But again, there's like there's a systematic interest in keeping us from being disengaged with each other. So that's what happened historically. And now it leads up to now. And I think the reality is my answer for the Asian community is the same answer that I have for the white community. And the same answer I have for like the Latino community is, first of all, are you down or not? Yeah. And if you're not, it's okay. It's totally fine if you don't want to post on your Instagram. It's totally fine if you don't think Black Lives Matter. Cool. Do your thing. Just let me know so I can not be involved with you at all. Because I don't have time. I don't have time to try to convince you. I don't have time. Like, if we're out in the street and 12 rows up, like, if you're not sure, you might give me up. You might make it home and I don't make it home. So we need people next to us who are really, really down. And then it's like, okay, again, like we said earlier, what access do you have in your community? So, there's a lot, I don't know. I think it's hard for me to say because, again, we don't have our own agenda, but I think it really boils down to, there's like, I think in all groups, like more in white people, obviously, because they kind of set the system up, but there's three groups of people who really have held on to oppressive beliefs, and have like held on to discrimination in their mind and practice prejudice. And that happens in every community. Black people do this to other Black people and to other minorities. White people do it to minorities. Asians do it to minorities, whatever. We see it all the time. And then there's this middle of people who are interested but uncertain as to how they can get going, or they're still dealing with the guilt that they have to, because, in order to really, really help, you got to deal with the guilt and you have to reconcile the fact that you're going to have to sacrifice. So you might lose friends, family, opportunities in the larger scheme of justice. And so then there's the third group of people who are qualified and who are ready to go. So these are people who already have the information, who already kind of understand the struggle, and who directly have something to offer. So it's just about, like, for the Asian community, for any community, I would just say, identify yourself. Where are you in those? Like, do you really understand Black history, and not just Black history, but do you understand institutionalized and structural, like, racism? And the reality is, in order to understand that, you have to know a lot about Black people and the way that we were treated in this country. But you also have to know a little bit about European history. You also need to know about a lot of marginalized groups, because they've done the same thing to all of us at different points in time. So the fact that we can say ICE camps, we can say internment camps, we can say slavery, and these are three different groups. And I'm sure that there's a group out there. I'm sure that Haitians at one point were extremely oppressed. I'm sure at one point, Jamaicans were extremely oppressed. And those are things that I don't know. So we have to get to a place where we stop seeing it so much about race, even though I know that race is important, but it really is more about, are you willing to use your access to privilege based on your race? So what kind of things can the Asian community really bring, or like what resources can you guys pull? So if you guys are the doctors and like the lawyers and the nurses and, and really the business owners and tech and all this stuff, which is a little bit stereotypical, so I apologize. But the reality is,
it's a good stereotype, and we don't say no to that. You know what I mean? But let me jump in real quick. Please. I think it's important, and you said it's for us to support as an Asian man. Have to get away from the race conversation, and it really is about the injustice of people. And because I think we take it for granted, and that's part of the privilege that I understand is if history went one way or another, it could have been Asians.
Yeah.
Right.
And but the reality was
right. And it was, and for some reason or another, our choice or not, right. Now we're in a different spot. But because of that, we have to be able to go in, and it just happens to be in support of our Black brothers and sisters, right? But it really could be any oppressed one. Like let's call it what it is. If it's white people on top and then Black people now, like if we're really talking money, Asian people are the richest people in America, right? I mean, we have the silent influence to make moves. And I think it's important to recognize that and take race out and just say, how do we help out whoever's being marginalized, whoever's being, ridiculed, or there's injustice there, and it's important.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, I think that taking race out is very important, but then also just for me in my life, this relationship is so important for me because when I grew up, I was a military brat, and I lived in a lot of places where there were not a lot of Asian people, right? Like, there's stories of like when people figured out they were Black or Asian for the first time. Like there's a time when I was like, I'm not Black. Like, you know what I mean? And so, just for my personal story, like, the Black community really took me in, they let me dance at MC. Like there was never a question of like, I got joked on hella, just like, like part of my stripes, but anyone can catch this smoke now. You know what I mean? But for me, that's why it's so important. And if that is my superpower to amplify and just to put that out for somebody out there, just to catch a little bit of that, that's important for me to say just now is it could have been us. It doesn't matter if it's us or not.
Yeah.
If you got it in any way, to Josh's point, figure out what your superpower is and how do you contribute.
And just to kind of clarify too, what I'm saying, to take race out of it, we still have to acknowledge which groups are being like targeted, obviously. And so I don't want anybody to say like, I thought you were Pan-Africanist. No,
absolutely not.
No. I just want to clarify to make sure that I'm being clear. When I'm saying take race out, I'm saying that you can use race to inform your decisions, and race will usually help you understand the way the system works in different ways. But when we're thinking about actual solutions, it's really like, I'm not so much interested in having 1,000 Asians, from the Asian community come and march and picket for me. That's a lot of Asians.
Yeah.
I would rather take like 100 of those Asians with some money to spend to help support a candidate in our district. You know what I'm saying? Or to like, okay, there's an organization that's being built that's gonna really look at prison reform, but they need this much money, whatever, to run their studies, or to da. That's another place the Asian community can come in and say, well, and again, it takes understanding. So I understand about the prison industrial complex. I understand how it plays. I understand how it oppresses all people in general. But I understand as an economic, as a social, as like a mental like tool and system, I understand how it mostly oppresses Black people. So if I'm interested in helping Black people, I'm interested, that is like a way we got to attack like the system and attack the structure. And so when I say that we got to take race out, we got to take race kind of out of our solutions and understand that the problem is bigger than race, and race is an aspect of the system that was created. And the consideration of race comes in when we're telling you what we need. We're saying, okay, the Black community really, 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 really needs police reform. We really fucking need it. Like, and everyone needs it, to be honest. But the black community really needs police reform. I'm not so much interested in getting these 4 guys convicted as much as I'm as interested in making sure that this can move forward. And so there's somebody in the Asian community, and there might be somebody in like the Latino community whose specialty is like law enforcement. Yeah. And maybe they went to school and studied, and in their free time, they're on blogs and like, And so then we mobilize that person to handle that problem because they're the most qualified. So that's what I mean is, one, we look at race to inform us. And then when it's time to make decisions, we say, well, not because that person is black, but how can I really attack the overall system? But you won't be able to understand that.
I'm so thankful we're having this conversation because you've been able to articulate so much better than me when it comes down to it. And I appreciate it so much because
I got you, bro.
It's because words matter, right?
They do.
And words really are, it's so silly when they go, sticks and stones and all that. No, words absolutely matter because when it comes to pen to paper, the wrong word or the right word will put it into completely different trajectories, right?
Well, even down to, I'm reading a lot of Rich Dad right now. And Kiyosaki talks about the first part of financial literacy is learning how to speak the language so that when you speak it and in an energetic way, right, as like a universalist, when you speak things, it like your mouth makes a certain shape, like air comes out, it's vibrating, it produces a certain wavelength. So speaking things properly, being able to say, well, I understand racism is a system. I understand that prejudice is a mindset, that discrimination is an action, that oppression is like a systematic like element, like being able to say those things and delineate those things and being able to see the difference and the commonalities, being able to speak properly, you know what I'm saying? Being able to really actually tackle the right issue. Because again, everybody's talking like, we got to change racist minds. And I'm like, well, we'll never get there because that literally does not exist. It literally doesn't exist. If you want to attack racism, we got to start thinking about structure and system. If you want to talk about people's minds, that's prejudice. And that comes down to like education. That comes down to like compassion and openness. And so it's about figuring out what people, again, where they really go. But it's tough though. It's tough because I don't think that people, again, it boils down to, they don't want us to know that it's kind of that easy, but it's really that easy. We all agree what the problems are. And then within the individual communities is you figure out how to leverage those things to support. And by attacking the system, by dismantling the system, I love dismantling. By dismantling the system, you are going to be helping Black people, period.
Sure.
And even if the Asian community, if like your immediate community in your city or whatever said, okay, all of us get together, we're organized now, there's maybe 100 of us in this group, 10% of all of our money coming into, we all work, we're all professionals, we can offer 10% of all of our money every month. At the end of the month, we're finding a Black business to support, or we're finding a charity to donate to, or we're going to, there are people in our community who want to do programs. We're going to support programs for Black people. Like anything, it's really about supporting the initiatives, not really the people. The people are really, really important, right? But we're not thinking about this for us. You have a son. I'm thinking about my kids. I have nieces and nephews, and I'm thinking about how can I break off as much of this system to where those kids have an opportunity to move differently, and that those kids don't have to do, like, if we could get through the marching and picketing stage because they convinced us that that's the only way. If we can get through that and get to somewhere else, it's obviously not going to solve all the problems, but at least our kids could do some different shit, bro. Yeah. I mean, like my ancestors were marching, and their ancestors marched or shouted or, raised their fists, like, and it's powerful, but they've already done it. And so our responsibility is not to say, oh, well, this is what they do, or this is how you combat racism, so let's just follow the playbook. No, we actually have to acknowledge the efforts of the people in the past who did the work. They've already done the work. And so our job is to inform ourselves about the steps that they took and now innovate into the future, because marching and picketing probably is not even relevant anymore in the technological social media age. It's too easy for people to be tracked. It's too easy for the message to be co-opted. And we don't know as a people who is spreading the message. We don't know where it's coming from. The fact that over the last 72 hours, we have seen so many police and military taking a knee and marching with. All of a sudden, there's this big explosion of all this stuff, right? And everyone is like championing this because they're like, yes, this is what we need. But my question is, first of all, how do we know that we can trust this information? Okay. Is it coming from the ground? And then secondly, even if we can't trust it, how does that help us attack the system? We're fighting over ideas. And I think it's a little bit disheartening sometimes.
I feel that from you right now. And, it's a conversation that needs to happen continuously. Right.
Yeah, definitely.
And, you mentioned my son, he hit my heartstrings. So you're an ass for that. So no, but that is a big reason why I want to shift our original conversation into this one, because, you're worried about your nieces and nephews and your future children having to go do similar things. Elijah is a mixed baby, right? He's going to have to figure out his own role in the world, and then his relationship with the system and how to combat those things as well. Yeah. And it's important because I still don't know if it's going to be better for him. Yeah. Right. We're putting work in now, and it takes time. I get that. And I speak from experience as a soldier, seeing different forms of oppression. My dad's my mom and dad are refugees from Vietnam, right? During the war. When I was deployed, I saw terrorism on communities, like violence. So my concept's a little bit different, but just even understanding that is like, that hasn't changed a lot. Yeah. Even when I go back to Vietnam, like there are still things there that I pick up on, and it's worrisome for me to have my son, who is right now the cutest thing. You've seen him, and he is just the best. And he has just no idea and concept of good versus evil, right? To him, if he puts his hand on the table, he feels the table. He doesn't understand someone made the table, that the table came from somewhere, that someone sold it, that it came, the tree that was made from came, he doesn't understand all those things. Yeah. And it's worrisome for me, but I'm glad we're having this conversation. I hope that when he looks back on this, he sees that two men, actually probably two boys who met each other way back when, and now are growing up to be men, are having a clear discussion that his father was able to learn some things today. Yes. And hopefully he sees that as a good thing, that I'm not Superman. I'm willing to learn here.
And to your point too, and anybody who has kids or is working with kids, or, and I've been working with kids for almost like 15 years. It's been a lot of my life. So if there's one thing that I know, and I think for people in general, but especially when we think about the youth, because a lot of the things, if we do this the right way, we should be able to move a lot out of their path, but it's still going to take some more time. But what I do encourage is to allow this conversation to be like a model for you showing pro-Black or anti-racist ideas and behaviors throughout all of your life. So Elijah is going to be a lot better off. And I did say it on my live too, but Elijah's going to be a lot better off if he grows up and throughout his years, he sees his dad hanging out, his mom and dad hanging out with different people. Yeah. He sees his mom, he's riding in the car and y'all listen to someone Black, a Black Power podcast, or like an Organized People podcast. Yeah. If he sees you supporting Black businesses, if he sees you support not just Black businesses, but Latino businesses, if he sees you standing up for people, if he sees you calling out racism, if he sees you, because again, when we're talking about being anti-racist, we're talking about having specific actions and ideas that combat the system and the structure of racism, right? So if he sees you combating those systems at every step of the way. Like, one day he's going to be a teenager. Maybe he's coming from like baseball practice or whatever, like kids like to do and shit. Yeah. And you take him to, hey, you want to go get lunch? Yeah, for sure. And you pull somewhere random. You say, hey, like, yeah, this is a black owned restaurant, or you pull up to like a food truck or like this is somebody that I know who's really starting. We got to support people who are building industries, who are building businesses. Like, and then when he listens to this podcast, it'll jog his memory of all the different ways that he's seen his dad be anti-racist. So now it's not so much about the idea, because unfortunately, a lot of us, and even in this generation, and that's why I try to be patient with people, because I understand that a lot of us have an acceptance. People talk about acceptance all the time, right? We have an acceptance of other people, whereas in the past there wasn't as much acceptance, but we still don't have a correct like mental framework to do differently. And so if we don't do differently, we can't make like lasting change, and then we can't set an example for the people in the future that are coming up now. So the people in the future need to not only see us march and picket and donate money, they need to see us be anti-racist across the board. Again, every single day. One day he might steal your phone, and he might just scroll on Instagram, and he might steal me. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, kids do. Yeah, he might be on Instagram, and then he might come across you following like Black Businesses Matter, or like Black success stories, or like, you go and you show him, you say, hey, look at this kid who's 16 and graduating from high school. He got da-da-da GPA. This could be you one day. And it's not an Asian person on the screen. It's a Black person on the screen. Right. You know what I'm saying? So it's really about, when we talk about like that anti-racist, I'm happy that you brought it up, because now that I'm really, really thinking about it, I really, really like it. Because racism is such a large system that in order to be anti-racist, it requires you to change your actions.
You have to be intentional.
Your mentality. That's it. And
right? You have to be intentional. Like you cannot. And this is what I'm learning, right? Again, humbly learning and admitting I don't know what I don't know. I think you said it before. That was beautiful. I don't know more than I do know. Right?
Yeah.
And that's why it was such a clean concept to me. Is okay. Well, if you're not doing something about it and you're complicit about it, you're letting the machine run, which means you are letting it happen. Mm-hmm. And that means you're racist. You're letting it happen. So you have to be intentional and not unfortunately, but you have to be actionable. In it. You have to speak, you have to do these things. And I think the concern that a lot of people have, that, when I talk to people who are white or in the Asian community specifically, is they are so concerned with not saying the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. And I understand that. And I don't want to say that that's not wrong, because we want to come correct. Right.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
But I hope that this conversation is one where, if you go in with the right intentions, to seek to learn, that it's okay. And Josh is a great example of, when yesterday was Tuesday, and the black square was coming up all over the place, and everyone's hashtagging Black Lives Matter. And then you had some really great points about that. Yeah. Can you just talk a little bit about the context of what that square was, how it happened? And then I want to jump in with why I think the way you did it was great.
Yeah, man. And I'll answer this and I'll come back.
Okay.
So this, the pause the show movement was started by, two Black execs at Atlantic Records. And the idea from the articles and the things that they were putting out, and other people in the music industry, was, this is a time for us to turn inward, especially as Black people, and to heal and to love and to grow. And we're encouraging other people. The phrasing I heard is, don't post your caramel macchiato, post something that has to do with Black lives. So unfortunately, what happened is, and we don't, and the other thing is that we don't know why it happened. We don't know if it was an accident or if it was co-opted, but the message started moving around, that we're taking a day off of social media, and that in order to show solidarity, you're just going to post a single Black box. on your page. And so this had happened at maybe at 10 o'clock on like Monday. I had started seeing it move. And so I just kind of got on the phone with people and I was like, guys, this is happening. We got to go on Instagram. We got to start spreading it. And, I don't think that we were necessarily the impetus of this, but I did see a lot of our content being shared out, on a larger scale. So I'm happy that we really fought against it. But the reason that it was so important is because, and again, you had said earlier that people don't want to say the wrong thing. And I think that that's powerful, but I try not to say anything unless I'm pretty confident in what I'm saying. And I think that people kind of need to get into that place of, again, it really is about being informed. And if you've done your research and you really believe in something, then you're going to be okay with being wrong about that thing because your true interest is in learning. A lot of people don't want to say the wrong thing because they're looking for some kind of catharsis, which I understand because it's tough for everyone. But if your interest is in learning and you're asking about an interest or a sector that's particular to you, you won't make that mistake. So in that way, everyone was posting these black squares and hashtagging Black Lives Matter. But if you know anything about the algorithm on Instagram, first of all, anything that's just a solid color, these are little fillers, they interact negatively on in terms of the algorithm. So what I mean is the algorithm is going to essentially push the post to the bottom. It's not gonna move. The same thing with text posts. If you ever post a text post, you realize you might only get 6-7 likes. Well, that's because the algorithm sees that and reads all the information and then pushes it to the bottom. So your timeline might not ever see it, right? So we post all these black squares. So the first thing is, the algorithm already sees that the information is no good. And no matter if it's, if we're talking about unity or togetherness, awareness, you're not going to like the black square on your Instagram. When you're scrolling past every black square. I'm sure that anybody listening probably liked less than 10 black squares. So when you don't like the content, then that also does something to the algorithm. And so when everybody was tagging Black Lives Matter, that did two things. Firstly, it blacked out the Black Lives Matter hashtag on Instagram. And so we had put videos up and stuff, but if you scrolled, it was literally just blacked out, a bunch of black squares. And then the algorithm is now going to start pushing that tag differently because of the amount of interaction that was happening. So it for me, it got me because I also had identified somebody in our immediate community who took responsibility for moving some of that stuff and for taking it upon themselves to add extra instructions rather than what the original, the two women, their name is escaping me, but whatever the original intention was coming from the music industry. And it boils down to the same thing for me. If you're not qualified, you shouldn't be making decisions. So nobody on their team apparently is a social media manager, but you're starting social media campaigns. You're not qualified because the social media person who understands Instagram, who understands marketing and algorithm would say, hey, if our purpose is awareness, this is actually going to hurt our cause. Yeah. And so that messed me up. But the good thing is we were able to get in front of it.
So I will give you that 100%. I feel like I saw a very, very quick adjustment. Yeah. For anybody that posted the original black square with the hashtag Black Lives Matter. Yeah. Right. And so good job to you and everyone else who was involved on re-educating. But the thing I want to commend you on is the fact that you took time to re-educate and not reprimand people who were trying. And I think that's what's important is, if you're scared to try or do something, first off, don't be afraid to say, is this okay? Because I can't imagine if I came and said, hey, can I do this? And you said, I can't imagine you co-signing something that was stupid.
Yeah, right? I'm not going to do that.
right. Because you care enough about me and the movement and just
facts.
Don't be afraid to do that. And then when people say, I don't want to do something because I don't want to be wrong, to me, that's a little bit of ego.
Right? Yeah, 100%.
So just check that a little bit and get that in there because a little bit of momentum is easier to shift than nothing at all. And then the last thing is, some people didn't post anything at all. And I think that's okay. I mean, to be wrong here, because I think we're talking about everyone has their own strengths and skills.
Yeah,
Social media may not be your one. So, some people were feeling guilty about it.
Yeah, I get that.
That I would say, that's okay. But did you do something else maybe, or what do you even know where your lane is yet?
I would more fall into that area.
Okay.
Because even down to like, we went through the steps, is like, we got to identify if what we're doing is actually meaningful. So people who were posting the red square, posting the black square, or I was getting at this other girl that I follow, who I now unfollowed and blocked, because we got to keep it that real.
Yeah.
During all this George Floyd stuff, well, I mean, it's still obviously happening, but at the height of it, there was a picture circulating of the officer with his knee on his neck, and pretty much my man George.
Can we
was
talk
like
about that for a second?
Yeah,
I saw your rants on it.
Yeah,
not your rants. I saw your message.
No, it was a rant. I was getting off.
No. A rant. Words matter, right?
Got you. Fair enough.
A rant is a stream of words that may or may not make sense out of emotion, right? Enough. And it comes out of a temper tantrum, right? That's where a rant comes in. No, you had a message about it, and I thought it was so clear. Cool. Please explain why, and I'll explain from my experience as a veteran why that makes complete sense to me.
Yeah. So just to also make a point about before I move too fast into this, we had talked about not posting. I think it's cool to not post, again, if you're doing something else. But then if you don't care about the cause, then don't post. Like, I think that we have to be okay.
Right.
And again, it really boils down to like sacrifice. Is we can't just keep poking people to say post, because it dilutes the actual the impact of it. I don't want people to pretend on my behalf. And so if you don't care, and if you haven't posted because it's not something that's important to you, then you need to be able to just accept that and stand in that, and maybe stand by that and say that, and know that any place, guys, any place, if you're, and I hate these areas, but if you're like really left or more in the middle or really right or whatever, like wherever you fall in your ideology, standing and drawing your line in the sand is going to have an impact no matter what. So we need to be very comfortable with saying, yes, I'm interested in this, how interested I am. And we need to stop holding people to the same standards, because not everybody cares.
But
and so
that real quick,
please.
I like that you said talk about drawing your line in the sand. You know what I mean? To go back to your point, and you specifically, and this is where one of the reasons why I think we align a lot is because you move, right? You're an organizer. You're ready to go, right?
That's facts.
When you have a plan in place, you're ready to move, and you are an executor, right? A lot of people talk, and that's their gift. That's fine. I think you have that gift, but I think you also are able to get people together and to make moves. And you said earlier is, if you're not ready, don't ask me for direction, because if I give it to you, I'm wasting my time. And
that's facts.
To that point, I would say along the same lines, if you're not ready, don't post yet, because someone might ask you for something. You have to be ready for that answer.
Yeah. And then just don't front on yourself, y'all. Like, I know there's a lot of pressure, you just have to accept that you won't be in the group. Like, you have to accept that you're not in the movement, and it's like signing up for a class. And yes, not yet, but I don't like to use yet, even though I do look into the future, because they could come and wipe us all out today. So,
I'll take that.
It really is. We got to take the movement day by day, because I don't think that anybody was ready to lose Malcolm. Nobody was ready to lose Martin. Nobody was ready to lose Huey.
That's fair.
And so I just, in a day-to-day way. So if you're not ready today, just know that you might not be down. And I think that if everyone really looks into it, they're going to find something that connects with them, and they're going to understand why this is really like a human struggle. It's not like a Black struggle. But anyhow, so the post about George, and let's get back to that.
Okay.
A lot of people were posting that picture, and they were talking about wanting to spread awareness, right? They wanted to show solidarity. But again, it boils down to people not having information.
Or not understand the intention.
Not understanding. Well, I think that they had an intention, but they didn't understand the consequence, or they haven't looked at it in a big picture way. So again, this white woman who's pretty cool for all intents and purposes, but does benefit a lot from Black culture in our community. She's a dancer, but dances with mostly Black women, does hip hop classes down to the fashion, her slang, does all the TikTok videos. And so all of those things are aspects of Black culture. And so when she posted a picture of my man, George, and had like a little filter over it and it had like hashtag Black Lives Matter, whatever, I messaged her and I was like, hey, I love the fact that you want to spread awareness, but can we maybe find a different picture that's not a dead Black man? Because you got kids that you teach that follow you, and some of them are Black. So how would you feel about them scrolling across that? And then plus, why are we so comfortable with spreading pictures of dead people? Again, there's a specific interest. People see something moving and they jump on it. And that's why I caution people to say, like, don't say that you're ready unless you really are ready to take the time. Being ready isn't necessarily about popping off right now, but being ready is I understand how to take the time to really see the issue and to understand what my place is in it. So if your intention is to uplift and to elevate Black voices and to show people that Black lives matter, in what way does posting a picture of a dead Black man being killed by a white man in America forward that mission? And the response I got was more like, well, we want to show people that is serious and that it's like really happening. And I'm like, look, first of all, we know it's happening. If we're Black, we know it's happening. If you're a person of color, you know it's happening. If you're white in America, you know it's happening. If you're on Instagram, you know that police brutality exists, even if you don't understand how it maybe operates systematically, right? You know that it's happening. And so we share this information. And is it odd to anyone else that this screenshot is the thing that started moving around? This picture of him actually being killed, not like him smiling with his kids, not other people on the sidewalk yelling at him, but like this picture of this man dying, like for all intents and purposes, the medical examiner already said that he was dead before he left the scene. So we really might be circulating a picture of a dead man on Instagram. And people don't understand the significance of that. You know, again, if you knew about lynchings in Jim Crow era, and you knew that they used to lynch young Black, especially Black men. A lot of what we see is Black men, but there's also some evidence that it happened to women as well. But a lot of it was perpetuated to Black men because there was idea about masculinity, family structure, of course, right? All that. They would take pictures, folks, and you can look it up on Google, and that's sad, but it's still out there. They would take pictures at lynchings, mobs of white folks, kids, men, women, old, young, some people in wheelchairs, like, and they would take these pictures. And if they didn't get put in a publication, sometimes they would get put in the newspapers, and those things would be circulated in white and Black communities, and they became postcards. So you will be able to get a photo of a dead Black man who may have been burnt and cut and bleeding in a mob of white people, and then flip it around and write a letter to your cousin who lives in a different state. And the U.S. Postal Service would carry that and deliver that mail for you. So when we start to push images of Black people being killed and being murdered, it is in my head. I'm saying, well, that's not coming from the Black community. That's coming from somebody outside who's interested in us and continually desensitizing us to Black bodies being brutalized and to continue to push the narrative that we are not in power. So then if you understand all those things and your intention is, I want to spread awareness, then you take a step back and you pause and you say, okay, well, the post awareness is good, right? But what are all the potential negatives? We got to do a cost value equation. What are the potential negatives? What are the negative aspects of this photo? And the first thing that people should have really looked at is, this is a dead person. Would I post a dead person? Like if we lost somebody in a car accident, and I lost my homegirls in middle school in a car accident, like, would it be appropriate to go to their obituary and to have like crime scene photos of the car, right, and the person hung out the car and the destruction? Or do you go to the obituary and you see the best pictures you can find of this person smiling, happy, right, maybe with friends, and so when people are moving. They're moving to be so quick and to alleviate that inner feeling that they're having of like, oh, I feel like I need to do something. And so they do the quickest thing, but it's not helpful. Like, and I understand that people were doing their best, but again, you gotta really ask yourself, how much information do you have, and how ready are you to stand behind your choices? Because anybody that I talk to about the Black Square, about my man Floyd, being like his picture being posted, especially that specific picture broke my heart, bro. Like I can't even,
it's coming back around. I saw again today.
I would say like, well, what's the point? Like, why did you choose that? Yeah. And a lot of what I got was, oh, it's circulating, or this is what's popular, or like whatever. So you got to think, folks. Let me turn the light on. Hold on.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
I think it's important, and I'll play devil's advocate a little bit on this one, okay? Because I think it's a fair point I'm about to make, but I also want to point out why it's not. Okay? Social media and pictures in general hold a lot of weight, right? True. When we talk about the influence of media, right? The written word is not as strong as a picture, which is not as strong as a video, right? It's not as strong as personal live experience. And so a picture has a lot of weight. And so historically, a photo like that might have accomplished something. Besides the lynching example, right? The example I give is during the Vietnam War, when the general public had no idea what was going on. Reporters used those videos and photos to show soldiers of how bad it was to share awareness. And I think that's what a lot of people had thought was going on in their head was, I'm showing this to create awareness. To your point, though.
I hear you on that.
To your point, though, are you unaware already at this point? Are you in a bubble already of what's going on? Yeah. Right? I think that the photo, with him laying around and the knee in the neck, I think that is egregious and is horrible. There's a place for that in a different realm, but not to your point though. Yeah. The awareness is already there. So how do we celebrate him in this moment?
Right. Place.
Just go ahead.
Go ahead. No, please. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Because what I'm getting at is the what's worked before doesn't always work now. And so we have to be intentional about how this picture is sent across, right? So the reason why I worked in Vietnam is because the awareness wasn't there, right?
That's true.
The medium,
I was going to say that.
The medium was new at the time. So it was very, very impactful, right? And it's important. But now using that photo to spread awareness, I use air quotes on this one, I don't do it often, but it's important because how do you not know at this point, right?
Yeah.
That photo isn't necessarily in line with what the message might be or what it could be from outside looking in, right? And so from a military mindset of talking about Vietnam, now talking about Afghanistan, understanding psychological warfare, dropping leaflets and all those other things, right? There is extreme psychological power in seeing the same thing over and over and over again. So let's imagine, 100 people see this photo we're talking about right now. What they see isn't the hashtag.
Right.
Whether they like it or not, what they see is a Black man dying. And they're going to feel whatever they want to feel about that. Right. What they don't see is what other message we could have gotten in front of them or, whatever it was. And it's tough because we talk about repost culture a little bit. And it's, I don't know. How do you get ahead of that, Josh? Do you take more time to sit back and go and contemplate what it is? Because I don't want to scare someone into immobility. I guess if that's the word I use now. Yeah. But I also want to make sure. Well, I guess, just talking out, I think you did the right thing by confronting that person.
Oh, no, 100%. I'm going to confront everybody else.
So is that the way we go about it? We try and then we take the feedback?
I mean, as a black man, bro, I think I have a different responsibility.
Okay, fair.
You know, and then also from my position, like if you go to my page right now, I'm talking a lot about blackness and sharing a lot of, I share like a lot of posts. Even in my highlights, I have highlights that are, you know, it says for the people. That's just positive black stories, inspiration, that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
when I scrolled past it and I felt something, I just knew that I had to say something. And I think to your point about Vietnam and the awareness, I think that that's exactly what it is that people were not aware. And also people were being lied to about what was happening. So that was really, really important for us to see, oh no, this is actually different than what we're being told. So in the case of that, like in the case of that photo, I think, yeah, it's just like tough. It's like, well, you're saying awareness, but what do you want people to be aware of?
Right.
Like, I don't know how that energizes people, because if you're already upset and you're already mobilized, you're already upset and you're already mobilized. Like, and so the only other reactions I think are like disgust or like sadness or like apathy. And
do you think that there's and I won't speak for whoever posted the photo because a lot of people did it.
Yeah.
Do you think part of it is hoping for a shock value for those that are not? Well,
we know it has shock value. Yeah, we know 100%.
But do you think it's a shock of saying, hey, wake up, this is what it is?
It would be if Instagram was the only thing we had in the world.
Okay, that's a fair point.
But between Instagram, Facebook, the news, like if you didn't come across it in your life, like in like your travels, then you're probably not tapped into like the issue. You know what I mean? So again, I'm totally here for people posting. I'm totally here for people like, but
we have to be considerate and thoughtful.
It's just people don't know. People like, again, if you knew that this is a tactic that was used to not only intimidate Black people, but to desensitize Black and white people to like violence. You know,
that's an interesting word too. Desensitizing it, yeah.
That's exactly what it is, bro. But like, if everyone, and this is just me speculating, right?
All right, yeah.
If everyone posted a picture of my man George and him dying, right? Did the response rate in terms of motivating people to do some kind of action might be something like, I don't know, like 25%. I don't know. Okay. Because I think it's hard to mobilize people off of emotion, and I'll address that because you did say about like being scared. I think if we posted pictures of him and his family, and him smiling, he was an athlete, he was like really involved in his kid's life. Like if we really went in the archives and dug some stuff up and found something and shared, this was a life that was taken. This was this man's life. And these are all the different places that now George Floyd will not be able to show up anymore in his life, you know?
That's a different message, 100%.
I mean, and then it motivates you to think about someone's life, because right now the emphasis is on the cop. And so everybody's trying to get a conviction of
I would agree with that 100%.
And we don't have a history of seeing convictions, no matter how many petitions we sign, no matter how much awareness we bring. And I like to use the example that if it was about awareness, it wouldn't have happened after Emmett Till. So, or Rodney King, like, come on, like
the list goes on, right?
The list goes on and on and on and on. And so the fact that people are still fighting the awareness fight, I just be over it. So when people tell me that as like a rationale, I think it's cool. But then I'm saying, what are you making people aware of? Because that actual image does not make it again, it shows you how powerful that policeman is. It starts to focus on him and what he is doing. Whereas the reality is we love George Floyd. And we're sorry that we lost him. We love Sandra Bland. We love Trayvon. But the reality is that they are victims of the system. And so we are interested in tackling the system. And so if the awareness is the key, what are you really making people aware of? And so people raising the awareness about George Floyd dying, it doesn't help the cause. It doesn't help to know that another Black man died, because people are just like, oh, another one. That's how and I understand people when they feel that way. And so when we don't properly engage people and we don't properly give them like the right message, again, to say, oh, this man was killed by police, we're like, yep. But to say, yo, this man lived a full ass life and it was taken prematurely, had more to give. That's a more powerful message, bro. That's a more powerful message.
I can get with you 100% on this right here.
Yeah. And I think it really boils down to, again, it's kind of laziness. Because we see it moving and we get like an instant like jolt, a knee reaction. People are, if you are outraged, you do get that knee reaction. But then you got to really stop and think like, like if somebody would have seen it and said, well, let me reach out to George Floyd's people and let's get like a Google Drive going. Let's talk to his family, talk to people who knew him, and let's get like a positive photos to share on social so we can honor his life. That would give people a lot more options. That would make people feel like they're more engaged. It would allow people to interact in a specific way, because right now, all we can talk about when we post this picture is death and police brutality. But if you see him with his kids, you see him in the community, you have pictures of him at his job, then we can talk about the family structure. We can talk about community building. We could say like George Floyd coached kids in basketball because apparently he was pretty good. He coached kids in basketball. And now we took George Floyd away from those kids. And so now who's going to step up and support the community?
Hey, okay.
We need to make sure that we have enough people in the community to support these kids in recreational activities. That's awareness.
That's
awareness
fire.
That leads us to a concrete decision. But again, bro, I say all of that kind of with a grain of salt, because without a specific body, organization, entity to represent the overall interest of Black people, people will be able to do whatever they want, because there's no clarity as to what direction it actually needs to go in. So if there was a body entity in place to say, no, nobody is posting the picture of George Floyd dying, because this is a history of lynching, the history of documenting brutality against Black people. And if we continue to share that and share that and share that, we're going to be desensitized. Now, there are some people who need to see that. Lawyers, like prosecutors, like other people who are interested in law enforcement reform need to be checking it from every angle, getting every video, because those people can use that information and leverage it into actual work. But there's a lot of people who are uninformed, just like, there is a place for it, but the place is the evidence folder. And the people who can handle that need to handle that. But for the general population, I don't think that that's an effective way to inform people about anything.
No, I think that's powerful. I think the awareness should lead to action.
It has to,
right? Or otherwise you just know, and now you're complicit, right? We get back to...
That's it. There it is. There's the loop. And now we're getting back to the loop, because you don't know better. So you don't do better. So you follow whatever the status quo is. And we all keep talking about acceptance and love and da. But we don't actually ever engage or actually learn anything. Right. So we keep doing the same things, right? And so then it makes this loop.
Yeah. I mean, it's very clear when, either you don't know or you don't care, right?
That's it.
At varying levels of it. And so now that you know, do you care, right? And what's the level of caring? And people are going to have to figure that out for themselves. I hope this conversation helps move that along for them.
I hope so too.
And I hope, you've been really good at mentioning a lot of different people, books, resources. If you're listening, hopefully you're taking notes and you're, going to go Google some things after, or, if you got a library by you got a library card, whatever, like figure it out. Cause I'm humbly, do my own research and everything, because it's important for me. Yeah. And, I'm glad we get to have this conversation. It's so important to me, Josh, and I love you for it.
Thanks, bro. I love you too, man.
I love that Elijah's going to be able to hear some of this. He's going to hear all of it, but
he's going to be a lot better for it.
I sure hope so. One of the things I realized very quickly after becoming a father, like that night in the hospital, it's crazy because we think as young men that when we have kids, that I'm trying to try words here. Without knowing any better, if you didn't have a really good relationship with your father, my dad and I didn't talk very deeply in it. I thought the role of the father was to make sure that my son ate, he had a roof. Yeah. And it was a very stoic idea of what fatherhood was, and that I would try to make his life better than before, than what I had. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's very valid. As soon as Elijah was born, I'm holding him in my arms that night in the hospital. It clicks in my mind that my job is not to make sure he's comfortable. My job is to make sure that he's equipped to make his world better. Mm-hmm. Like, he is my direct line into the world after I'm gone to make an impact. And it has to be that black and white, right? It has to be like, hey, are you making the world better or not, son? And I'm going to help you make it better. You're out. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this, and because you dropped so much wisdom already, if you were to talk to my son now, what piece of advice would you give him, whether it's on this topic or not? Just, the idea of being a man or a light in the world. What would you tell him?
Dang, that's good. All right, I'm gonna tell him two things. The first thing I tell him is not to be so worried about being perfect, and that relies in like life, but also as it relates to the struggle right now. So many people, like you said before, are scared of saying the wrong thing, are scared of like not doing the right thing, of like being unsure. And I think we just got to all know that we're not perfect, man. Like, I'm not perfect, and I'm blessed to be able to speak from a place where I've accumulated enough knowledge that I can kind of support my theories, but I'm still not perfect. I'm still pretty, I'm still unread in a lot of different ways. There's still like a lot more I need to know, a lot more I need to do for myself. So for my little man, I would just tell him, like, once you're okay with just not thinking anything has to be a particular way. And once you understand that no matter what, every day that you wake up, that's a dub. Like, you're still in the fight and you're still winning. Yeah. That the rest of it will really work itself out, man. Like, it's really okay. It's really okay to feel like uncertain, because everybody is there. And those places that you feel uncertain, is it something that's important to you? And if it is, lean into it. And if it's not, it's okay to throw it away, because we get so mixed up on trying to do everything. So I would just say the first piece is just don't be perfect. It doesn't exist. And if you can be yourself and be the best version of yourself, then that's going to be really powerful. And then the second piece of advice would be just to listen. Like, just listen, like, and not like, and listen to everything. Like, get into the habit of listening to other people in conversation, listening to other ideas, get in the habit of like just listening and like taking a moment to just be in your environment. And that kind of is like a mindfulness thing, but that's something I'm pushing right now is, young Elijah, just take a second every day, get in the habit of taking 60 seconds and just like sitting by yourself and breathing and understanding who you are, understanding that everything that happens, every time you blink, every time you move your fingers, every time you move your head, every time you say a word, it's the power of you as an individual creating the energy to make all those things happen. And we have a lot of power in like being ourselves. And it kind of goes back to the perfection thing, but we're so often looking outside of ourselves for validation or for approval that we don't sit with ourselves and just feel like our inherent energy like working. And so that would be my second piece of advice. Is just listen. If you're walking down the street and you catch a breeze, if you ever seen the movie, I believe it's Hero with Jet Li. He's in the field with the rice paddies. The leaves? He had just got there.
Oh, the way the grass moves.
Yeah, the way it moves. And then everybody's like, they're out there doing the rice paddies, they're picking shit, and then whenever the breeze comes in, everybody would just stop and would take it in. And okay, I thought,
so this is Asian culture. I can jump in now. It's fearless. Fearless. And
it is fearless. Yeah, get into it.
That's a powerful scene.
It's powerful scene, man. And so that's like, it was Fearless. Such a good movie. He was great in that movie. But I think that moment of, and we saw that when he got there, he had so much on his mind that he was making mistakes
Oh, he was trying to be the fastest planter.
He was trying to be the
rice.
fastest, and like, and they had to go back and pretty much fix all his work. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, but again, that was him being worried about being so perfect and doing things so efficiently and doing things the best. And we saw the growth and the change actually happen when he slowed down and took a deep breath. And then with each step, with each action that he made, it was intentional. So that also relies to the struggle too, folks. Take a second and breathe. Yeah. Don't feel like you have to engage all the time, every day. A lot of people are making mistakes because they're feeling the social pressure to engage. Fuck anybody else. If you know what you're really about, you don't have to prove yourself to anyone else. Yes. And your work will speak for you. So you don't have to continue to show how great you are. There will be evidence in your work. So take a second and really breathe and really feel the room and really feel your energy. And before you post, before you say something, take that 30 seconds and breathe and say, what is my intention? Do I believe that this will like create the biggest amount of impact? Is there anything else that I could do that could be like more important? Like I saw so many like artists and people reposting that picture of George. And I'm like, y'all could have drawn a picture of his face. Y'all could have done like a digital. You could have went in, done like chalk outside. It doesn't matter. Like there are so many ways. And so when we take a second and we really stop thinking about being perfect or stop thinking about doing everything the right way and just breathe with ourselves and just see, and like the answer is there. And that's like the magic, I think. I think the answer is really there. And we just have to take the time to slow down and take the pressure off of ourselves for not knowing. Because if you don't know, that's a good thing. If you know that you don't know, that's a good thing. Because that can inform you about where like what that direction is. So
yeah.
That's my advice.
I appreciate that. I know he's going to get a lot out of it. And then the last question is, I really genuinely enjoyed and appreciate this conversation.
Heck yes.
Who can I talk to after this that's influenced you, impacted you, mentored you, whether I know them or not? Someone has given you these nuggets, and I want to continue to find it from the source.
I mean, I'm in a lucky position that I was around a lot of intellectual Black folks. So
sure,
I can shout out. I mean, people who really influenced me in my mentality. James Ashley, who was my intake coordinator for Alpha, the Pi Nu chapter. Patrick Durr, who's one of my fraternity brothers. We had a lot of conversation just about race and about sharing information. My homie Freedom, who lives out here. His name is Daryl Dunn. You can find him at The Freedom on Instagram. He posts a lot about Black information, Black lives. And he comes.
I think he's actually been to my apartment.
Yeah?
Yeah, when I was living in LA. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, probably.
When I was living in LA, I got moved to San Diego and I had my apartment for like the next couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. And Taylor was living in my apartment at the time. I think she had him over, like hanging out and stuff. So
yeah. I love Freedom.
Yeah.
He's really, really smart guy. And then I don't know, bro. I get my information from so many different places. My boy, Brother Polite on Instagram, POLIGHT, Polite. Okay. He's a little bit more radical, but he understands the workings of the system really, really well. And so I think that he's like a good person to look into. And there's if you're looking just for get some more information, there's a Instagram page called Black Business Matters, and they repost a lot of really good information. And then in terms of, so not people that I've talked to, but I've read obviously Malcolm X. I've obviously his autobiography, and also have his a book of his speeches. So I'm trying to get as well read in that way. I'm informing myself on the policies of guys like Stokely Carmichael, Huey Newton, Bobby Seale, Fred Hampton, who are all in different ways associated with starting the Black Panthers. I'm also trying to do some research on the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which was obviously like an organization that was kind of between the South and the North of students who were helping move the nonviolent like culture forward. So I think, man, there's so many people, and there's like so many things I would like to tell people to look up. I think that a really good place to start, or in my opinion, is Malcolm X. I think, and you can go on YouTube and watch his speeches if you're not ready to like get the literature and stuff, because it is kind of heavy. But go on YouTube and listen to him speak, or even Spotify. There are Spotify playlists of speeches. So there was a time, I don't have Spotify anymore, but I would just listen to different speeches from Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and from these leaders, Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Louis Farrakhan. And so I haven't necessarily read those things, but I've listened to them. And so what I mean to say with all of that, I know I've said a lot of things, but there are so many resources out there. I recommend starting with Malcolm X because he, in my opinion, does a very, very good job of breaking down the aspects of the system. And I think that's a really important understanding to have. And then from Malcolm X, I would recommend moving to like a Marcus Garvey, who is one of the fathers of Pan-Africanism, and then start thinking about the Panthers. And then from there, once you kind of get like a good base, you'll be able to kind of to spread out and to look at everybody else, or like other movements. There are obviously like smaller movements and things that happen internationally. But in terms of, just getting that information of how we can operate as an American people, those are some of the men, and there are a lot of women too, for sure. Fannie Lou Hamer, and really read more about like Harriet Tubman, and really dig into, people said like there's like this whole idea that she just moved people, but she was really a gangster. Like, she was also like kind of like a mini cartographer. She drew maps of her routes and was like very influential in helping us understand the actual landscape of like rural America at that time, because people were drawing maps as they were moving.
Right.
So,
okay.
It's like all these, like, they're like little things, but find the leaders, especially Black leaders who are making moves in America, and that'll help you at least get a better idea of the structure of the system. And then from there, you can really dive in.
I appreciate it, man.
Thanks.
All right, let me turn these off a little.